Welcome to Haven of Horror. Today we're going to be reviewing Dracula from what year is this?
1933? I don't know
1930
off the top of my head.
from 1933. This is video one in a decades of horror series that the Dayghost has come up with. If you don't know us, I'm Subject879. This is the Dayghost, who is really focused on his phone.
Well, I'm looking up when this movie came out
No, you're good. How are you doing today,
'cause
buddy?
I'm pretty good. I'm representing. I got the novel right here of the film that we're doing.
So this is much more Austin's territory than it is mine. I'm the 80s slasher zombie guy, and he's much bigger of a fan of the Universal Monster movies than I am. Not to say that I dislike them. So Austin, tell us a little bit about Dracula.
Dracula is kind of an adaptation of this book, and from what I understand, also a play from 1924. I've heard some of that gets into this movie as well, but it stars Belle Lugosi, of course, as the Count, and it's not exactly the book, but the kind of basic plot is there in that Count Dracula lives in Transylvania. He's coming to England, and there you go. One of the biggest things that we changed is that instead Jonathan Harker isn't the person that goes to the castle to handle like his transaction for buying property in England. It's changed to Renfield, and yeah, stuff ensues. You got Van Helsing, his enemy, of course.
Okay, so I'm going to be
And
honest, I did not realize that Harker was not the one who was sent to Transylvania. So that's Renfield who's there, and then he's on the boat, and he's the guy that goes crazy. Okay. I didn't realize the guy on the boat was the same guy that like went to Transylvania.
Yeah, it's Renfield instead in this version, because I think he's kind of the unsung hero of this movie. Like the actor that plays Renfield, he's really good in this movie. Of course, Bela Lugosi is Dracula. He's
I
awesome.
think that is one of the best like horror performances I've ever seen. Um,
Yeah, and 'cause of course you have to get into, this is like a very early Hollywood production, and just the way it's shot isn't super great. It's actually interesting because back then, for different language versions of films, sometimes they would have a different crew and they would basically make a different movie just on the same sets. So, like, while this film was filming, like, they would film and then they would stop, and then a Spanish like team would come in and they made a Spanish movie. And if you ever look into it, the Spanish version of Dracula is like way more dynamically shot. They just don't have Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Like this is a movie that's held up by its performances.
oh, interesting.
Mm.
So as you know, I've just started getting into the Universal monster films. I would put this at number 3 so far. Although my favorite performance out of any of them is this one. Where do you rank this in the classic?
So right now, I have seen 9 of these movies so far. 9, yes, and I have it as number 5, so I have it exactly in the middle.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I do remember in the movie they do give credit for a screenplay, I believe. So I think you were correct that this adapts part of a play. But and I see what you're saying about it being shot, but I don't think it looks that different from like say the Invisible Man, other than the Invisible Man is more ambitious in its set design.
Uh, See, I think Invisible Man is shot at least slightly more dynamically. You get a lot more just kind of stuff going on, and One of the big things too is with James Whale films is it doesn't feel as much like you're on a set. Like uh, Citizen Kane kind of famously made it so you could see, the ceiling of the sets. But that's actually something that James Whale was doing way before. Um, while Dracula is just kind of very static and very Doolittle, who's been on the show before, has described it to me as being very like hypnotic and like kind of like dreamy, which
I
I
can
kind
see
of
that.
agree with, especially you get all of those close-ups of the big like Lugosi stare, the like
Oh yeah, and it loves those shots.
yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
and obviously, it is important, like you said, to take into consideration this is one of Hollywood's first major productions, and taking place into the time that it came out. Is there anything in this movie, effects wise or shot wise, that just kind of makes you laugh? Because I had a couple.
Uh, no, I to be honest, I think I have a very strong kind of sense of like historical perspective. So like when I'm getting into something like this, it just kind of all washes over me of like, okay, I'm in like the moment of like when this movie was made type of thing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, yeah, there's probably stuff that is unintentionally funny now, but I'm not really thinking about it because I'm thinking more about what audiences back then would have been thinking.
Okay, because the
We're still in the era where they have to like come out and warn people before the movie starts.
the big shot of the bat coming in the window made me laugh because it doesn't look like it's moving. And like, I don't mean that in a bad way. I think you can have a bad effect, or not bad, but an aged effect that is unintentionally funny, but still admit it's impressive for its time. Which, I mean, as far as I can tell, that is very impressive for its time. It's just funny because it's like just a bat hovering in the window, but they act like it's moving.
Mhm. Well, I think with something like that, because I assumed that's where you were going, yeah. And with stuff like that, I'm just kind of used to that kind of imagery, I guess.
The black and white helps these movies so much. It just gives it this like gothic atmosphere. And this and
Mhm.
Frankenstein have so much atmosphere that it's just like, can we do that again?
Well, yeah, that's the big thing is 'cause we can't really show blood or anything. It's all atmosphere. It's all that kind of like classical, like dark gothic sets, cemeteries, that kind of stuff. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
And obviously, like we mentioned, Bela Lugosi oozes like dark charm, but also like I buy that this guy's a threat. Um,
Mhm.
Now, obviously, I think there is a merit to having a vampire movie that can do like blood and gore and stuff like that. So I'm interested to check out the '90s version to see how that holds up. But this set a really high bar for vampire film.
The horror stuff is where we get into the blood too.
This set a really high bar for vampire movies, and I'm not a big vampire fan. Um, I like Blade, this, and of course, as anybody who's on the channel's watch, I'm a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I don't like that show because it's vampires. I just happen to like that show that has vampires. So, are you a big vampire fan?
Um, yeah, I guess I am. I don't know, I like vampire stuff. I've like written some vampire stuff. I've like been a part of different vampire like shorts that people have made, as well as just like consuming a lot of maybe not a lot of it because there's a lot of vampire stuff I'd like to read that I haven't. But yeah, no, I like vampires. I think they're cool.
I guess we should also mention that this is an experienced director. I don't know if you've looked up his filmography, but this is actually the tail end of his career.
Yeah,
Um,
Todd Browning, right?
yes, his
Doolittle has
first
told
film was
me,
in 1915.
yeah, and Doolittle has told me that his other films are much more cinematically shot than this, and it's like kind of weird that this movie isn't. And I'm wondering if that is maybe because they're trying to capture that stage play um, that also inspired the movie.
Yeah, maybe. And this guy it looks like he did another vampire movie in 1935. Um,
Oh,
but
while you're looking that up, what year is this movie? Because
this
I'm
is
pretty sure I got it
1931.
wrong. Oh, 1931. Okay.
Yeah, and his last movie was 1939. So like this is at the very tail end of his career, and it seems like he was just kind of whatever he wanted to do. Because his very next film was he did another horror movie, and then he moved into drama and like sports movies.
Well, yeah, because a lot of older directors are more workman directors. You know what I mean? Where it's less style and more. Okay, now you do this. Now you do this. And you do that. Um, like a later on example of that, I think, would be somebody like a Robert Wise or a Richard Donner.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of jack of all trades can kind of just jump into any project.
Interestingly, he did another vampire movie called Mark of the Vampire that also has Lugosi. I would be interested to see that. I've never
Yeah,
heard
I
of
have
that.
heard of that. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. Lugosi's got like quite a lot of stuff under his belt, despite a pretty sad story of bankruptcy and stuff.
Yeah, which I think we might talk about that here in a minute. But just to get into a little bit of the plot of this movie is he comes to England like you mentioned, and sets his sights on I guess Renfield's wife. Is that the case here in this story?
Uh, no, I don't think so. Nina, no, 'cause doesn't she have a husband in the movie? Now I'm blanking. Or she's
Oh
got like
no,
somebody there.
yeah,
Yeah,
because Jonathan Harker is in this movie.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, he's just not at the beginning. Like they swapped that out. That's what I was
Mhm.
thinking. Yeah, like Jonathan Harker shows up later. Yeah.
I struggle with names, and especially in this movie where why am I? No offense to these actors, but it's all just like white guys in suits. Like I I need something to distinguish them because I'm shit with names. Um, so he
Well,
comes to
yeah,
England
and
and
that's
then sets his
definitely
sights
part
on
of the
Mina.
time.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Sets his sights on
Uh,
Mina, who is with John Parker, and they're trying to save her.
yeah, it's definitely a part of the time, and like just kind of actors that are just kind of there, where it's like they fill their role, and that's kind of it. And the Dracula movies, especially, I think, have a lot of bland leads, and it goes all the way into Hammer too. Um, but like I said, I think with this movie, it's that kind of trio of Dracula, Renfield, and Van Helsing that kind of rise above that and give really good performances.
Oh, absolutely. And I've noticed that with the other Universal films I watched, where the main characters seem to be the one I care about, whether it be Frankenstein or the Invisible Man or um, whatever. I don't know what is going on with this camera. It's driving me nuts. So I guess because this is a very simple film, it's more about like I get at least nowadays, it's more about the feeling and the atmosphere and the performance of Bela Lugosi as Dracula. There's not a lot story wise here. It's just kind of like we mentioned, Dracula comes to England, seduces a girl, gets killed, girl goes back to normal. Um, how close is this to the book, other than just the change we mentioned?
Well, I am like here, so
Oh, I thought you had
uh,
read it before.
oh no, no, I'm just reading it. I just started it. Um, but from what I understand, because I know like quite a bit about the book, and it's definitely like not really adapting a lot of it. Dracula has had like a billion adaptations, but has never had that like fully like accurate one. Like we always kind of change things. I think the '90s Coppola film is supposed to be the closest.
You mean to tell me Wes Craven's Dracula 2000 isn't a perfect adaptation?
No, no. Neither is was like Dracula in 1975 or whatever, the Hammer horror film.
Yeah, which I'd like to see some of that stuff. That's also I've never seen any of the Hammer films. Um,
Mhm.
Dracula 2000. Although, and you're gonna crucify me for this probably. I really enjoyed that Dracula Untold from a few years ago. Like it was all right.
That movie is basically what the first half of the second one was supposed to, of like the sequel to this movie was supposed to be too,
Oh, interesting.
but done by James Whale.
I would have. Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know, because we're not reviewing every Universal monster movie, we're doing one from each decade. But I have been in my free time watching some other Universal monster movies, and I've been discussing with Austin. James Whale is becoming like one of my favorite directors of that time period. I want to see his Dracula movie, man. It would have been
Yeah,
awesome.
no, he had this whole like grand epic, like it was gonna be like this, kind of like war thing at the beginning where it was Dracula's origin, and like Lugosi was gonna come back and it was gonna have like him and his friends. And I think they were supposed to get killed by like a giant bat, and then it would then make him, a vampire and stuff. And then it would like go forward to after the first film in the second half and do the kind of Dracula's daughter storyline. And then it might have been a budget thing or something, but I think Universal like fired him from that project, and then they brought in the next director, and then they completely scrapped the first half, stretched that second half out to a full movie, and Lugosi was cut down to he's just like a model of Dracula in the in like a scene in a coffin. Like they didn't even bring him back, and it's like because I don't know if you know this, but it's probably a good thing to mention. But Lugosi, of course, is like a perfect Dracula here, and we will keep doing Dracula movies. He only comes back one more time, and it's in the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Fuck.
No, he did not get what he deserved in terms of this role.
No, they didn't. That's such a shame. So let's use that as a segue, because Austin, you told me quite a bit about it, but I think you've researched quite a bit about like Bela Lugosi and that whole era, correct?
Yeah, I've watched some videos and stuff on it.
So tell us a little bit about what happened to Bela Lugosi after this movie.
So I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but basically the theory has always been because he was asked to do Frankenstein next, and he said no because he didn't think the role was good enough. So Universal kind of took that to heart, and he basically became just one-off stuff here and there in certain movies. But like, he was also just like a really struggling actor and a drug addict. So like at one point he had to sell his house for money, and he was on. It wasn't exactly welfare, but it was like a thing like that that they have in the actors union that like they could go for help if they were struggling, and so he had to do that. And then when they did the third Frankenstein film, they brought Lugosi in. I think it was his first Universal film since Dracula, and so the main actor of that movie was paid, I think, $5,000 a week for the shoot. Uh, Karloff was paid 3,000 a week for the shoot, and Lugosi, who they knew was struggling and couldn't afford to say no to any offer, was given $500 a week for the shoot, and was only given a week of filming, so he was just going to be paid $500 just for this shoot. And then the director was nice enough to be like, "Hey, Lugosi, hang out on set with us, like for the entire shoot, and they will pay you the $500 a week for the entire thing," which I think was like 8 weeks. Um, so like there was that, I guess. But yeah, no, he definitely had a rough life.
shame. You should also mention as well, because I remember reading about this. Part of the issue was that he also didn't speak very good English. Um, and my source is Wikipedia, so take it for what you will. I haven't looked heavily into this, but my understanding is, but another issue was he didn't speak very good English. And like you mentioned, he would get second billing to someone like Boris Karloff or Lou Chaney Jr. and stuff like that. And he became addicted to medicine, painkillers, drugs, and then obviously he started working for what's that guy's name?
Ed Wood.
Ed Wood, making shitty like B movies or C
Hmm.
movies. At what point is it just a C movie? Like,
Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably when Ed Wood starts having to make porn.
well, Austin, I don't have a whole lot else to say about Dracula other than Bela Lugosi is one of the greatest performances in a horror film ever, and I wish he'd gotten more roles. I would have loved to seen a whole franchise with this Dracula. You know?
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. I think also just like another thing to mention, I think one of the best shots of the movie is Renfield when they're on the boat when they're like it's like looking down at him where he's maniacally laughing. I think that's one of the best shots in this movie. It's just great.
Oh yeah, that absolutely was just like, ugh, like there's something in that guy's eyes.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think because obviously Lugosi's the standout, but I think he's kind of like the unsung, like doesn't get mentioned enough with this movie. That actor's awesome.
Yeah. So I guess
And
we'll.
Van Helsing's also great, but he'll next time in Dracula's Daughter, he'll get kind of a lot more to do.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm excited to watch that. That'll probably be one of the movies we do next year for decades of horror. We'll just keep adding Universal movies to the rotation till we're to what, like the bottom of the barrel, like the creature walks among us or whatever that movie's called.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh, I did want to mention
Invisible
this.
Agent.
I can't believe I forgot. This was also interesting to have seen having seen Nosferatu already.
Mm.
Did you ever get around to
And I
watching
watched.
that?
Yes, I don't know if you remember when I watched this because it's like month or two ago when I watched it for the first time. But I watched this and Nosferatu 2 days apart. Like one night I watched Nosferatu, the next night I watched this. And yeah, they are very interesting to watch back to back.
That must be interesting. So I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but just for fun's sake, Nosferatu or Dracula?
I don't. I think they both rise to some of the same spots, but also each is kind of better for different reasons. I think. Like obviously the actor for Nosferatu, Max Schreck, and Bela Lugosi, I think are both great. Lugosi, because it's like a speaking role, is kind of given more of a chance, like to show off his acting range. Um, I think Nosferatu's like a bit more cinematic, especially in its shots, with the shadow work. Um, and the music in that is great. While in this film, there's very little music in places. There's just none, which is another sign of just kind of early Hollywood.
Yeah, there was a couple places I thought like my movie was broken because there was like no sound. It was very interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. But I think both are really good.
All right, so final question before we sign off on this movie. What is your pitch for a Dracula reboot?
Okay, am I allowed to go period, or does it have to be modern day,
You can do period,
or just in general?
just in general.
Um, but also part of the problem is what is there like? left to do with Dracula because there's been so many reboots. Like it's hard to not just be like just kind of do it more traditionally, but like I don't know, you know what I mean? Like there's just been so many Dracula movies. But yeah, I would want it to be more gothic and dark like this. But I guess more mixed with some of like the kind of like blood of I don't know, maybe Hammer. I'm not entirely
Break
sure.
breaking news tomorrow: Universal and Blumhouse presents Rob Zombie's Dracula.
I think of all the Universal monsters, I think Dracula might be the hardest to reboot, just because we've done so much Dracula.
Okay. See, I would do, and obviously I haven't seen a whole lot of the Dracula movies. I've only seen this one, Nosferatu, and I saw the Coppola one like once. I would lean into, like you said, the gothic horror and the gore. Like make this a Dracula that just like enjoys killing people.
Mhm.
But that also might just
Yeah,
be
for
those
sure.
slasher sensibilities of mine.
Yeah, well, just wait till we get to the Lon Chaney Jr. Mummy movies.
Yeah, I might watch those this
That's
month.
their slashers.
Well, Austin, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5, mostly for the performances, and I wouldn't mind seeing if if you remake this, just this script, but with maybe punch it up a little bit and make it more cinematic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
what
no,
is
I can see
your
that.
rating for Dracula?
Yeah, I was jumping back and forth, but I think I'm also gonna give it a 4.
Woohoo! It's the first time we've agreed on a while.
Um, yeah, I think Bela Lugosi probably, or I think Bela Lugosi deserved like a better Dracula movie, but at the same time, I don't think this is a bad movie. It's still a really good movie. But I just think because he's the definitive take, he also deserved the definitive Dracula movie,
And we
and I
don't
don't
have that
think
yet.
this is necessarily it.
Yeah. Well, and I struggle with saying this, but I don't know if you could get the definitive Dracula movie at a time in Hollywood when you couldn't do blood. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I can see that. I also like it's never in my head while watching it either, though.
That's also
Like with the
true.
Universal monster films,
Yeah, that
it's
might be just me like thinking about it
yeah.
after the fact. Well, guys, that is it for this review. Austin, I'm really glad you came up with this list of films. This is going to be an interesting experience. Uh,
Mhm.
Keep an eye out for our Wolfman review. It should be posted a few hours after this one goes live, and we will talk at you guys later.
Yep. See ya.